shall obtain a site plan approval from the board for the following types of building development. A, all new principal buildings and or accessory buildings for non-residential use. B, additions of more than 1,000 square feet of floor area to such existing principal and accessory buildings. And C, any change of use in site or existing building. So yes.
But once you've gone through the site plan review and you have allowed him to do that, if there is a lapse of a year,
And there's no change.
and there's a lapse within a year, and then they want to go back up with that, he's not really changing what's already been approved through site plan review on an existing use, because there's a lapse. Now, if that lapse is longer than a year, you would have to require them to go through site plan review. You have a year grace period. That's the law. You have a year grace period. So, if...
I'm sorry.
Where's that?
Where's
that
where's
law,
that?
Cliff?
I-
I never said anything about
I've
that.
heard some things contrary to that, and you may be right.
No,
I'm not sure where that is.
if you have up to, it takes 1 year for a use to be disqualified from your property. So
Unless noticed in documentation, unless it's noticed by the board, okay, we're only doing this for 30 days, then at the end of the 30 days it was expired. Unless there's an exception in the application process.
That's right, but what I'm
I don't
saying
know.
is if you have a
I don't
use,
know.
if you have a use, it'll come to me where it's at and I'll pull it up here in a second. But if you have a use, there is a grace period. You have up to a year to re-engage that grace period, that use, before it becomes no longer a current use of the property.
So in your
Because then it's
scenario,
called abandonment of that
Right.
use.
so you're saying in that scenario, the current or future owner of that property up there, or Eddie for that matter, because he now
Right.
owns a piece of the rec area, they have their use for a year. They do not renew their permit. And you're saying in this situation they would have 365 days from the end of the permit as a grace period to renew
Yes.
by law.
I believe it's from time of approval, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's it's actually from the time that the use ceases to be
So
a use.
Whatever
Not from when we approve it.
so you're saying from the end of the
If I'm
permit,
mistaken, as long as
for the
it
conditional
is
use
1 year.
permit, the approved conditional use from the date that terminates, you would say you'd have 365 days.
Unless,
Yes.
I believe what it'll say is, unless otherwise specified, it's 1 year from the time of approval by the board, so it has a definite date. I think that's how it's listed, but what we may want to do to avoid any possible complications is have a provision listing exactly that temporary use will be applicable for 1 calendar year, and that renewal has to be placed in either on or before the date of approval. And that
Under what
solves that problem.
circumstances would you give a 30-day conditional use?
It could be mud season, so you can't have traffic in the area or whatever. There could be, and you can give
You can put restrictions on a use you can restrict certain activities during a period of time, like we post roads.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you grant a conditional use, I'm saying, if Bob Bordeaux comes down here, or anybody who owns the rec area, come down here to get a conditional use permit, I would not think that it would be only for 30 days.
No, but it could be. I was just using that as.
But that's up to, that would be up to
That'd be up
him.
to the board.
No, it would be up to
No, the
the
board can-
property owner. It would be up to the property owner to put in that request for the period of time that he is looking to have that conditional use.
But I think what you'll find is that unless specified by the approving body, it is assumed for 1 full year. But the body could specify.
Does that
okay,
say that in our
No.
I believe
in our
it's in the
zoning
state-
ordinance? Did we
I
put a
believe that's
time
in-
limit?
No, I believe it's in the state statute.
Hold on.
That's funny.
To this point, I've been assuming that no matter what happened, the board would set the time limits. Now, the applicant could ask
If
or
the time limit-
request.
If the time limit is not specified by the overseeing body, it is assumed for 1 year. Cliff's absolutely correct.
Okay, I mean,
But the board can restrict it, say, okay, if you're gonna have concerts, we'll only allow until the end of August. And then after that date, we would allow it. That, we can put a restriction in as the governing governing body. But if date is not specified, it automatically assumes to one full calendar year, and that's exactly what Cliff was
Okay.
discussing.
No, if you wanna go to the concert issues, if he
I'm
was.
just saying as-
No,
as
no,
an
no, but what
example.
I'm saying is if he was to put in a request for the concerts, it would be for a year time spent. That's normally what you would do, is put it in
Right.
for a full calendar year. Okay, at that point, we can further restrict that calendar year, saying that you can hold no more than 1 or 2 concerts a month at your facility.
Exactly.
So those are the restrictions you can put it on. You can't say you can only do a concert for 1 month.
Yeah, because then you wander into the special event permit kind of arena, don't you?
That's
That's a totally different animal.
Now you're telling
Yeah.
him what he can and can't do.
I-
Remember, when we
I-
restrict something on somebody's property, you have to have legal standing in order to do so. You can't just arbitrarily, this board cannot arbitrarily tell a property owner that is coming before this board for a special use permit that we're not gonna allow X, Y, Z, and E because we don't like it. You have to have legitimate legal reasons to disallow those things. Like, it will be an undue burden on our road system. It'll be an undue burden on the property, the abutters.
Precisely, and that's the
Or
30
life safety
30-day
or
thing
some
was
other
just
issue.
As you were using a hypothetical, an example. We can put a restriction on it for a time frame, but that can only be done in writing by the governing body. Otherwise, it is automatically assumed for a full calendar year period. But we can do something
Well,
like
we-
that. See, that's not-
I don't believe we specify it in our zoning ordinance.
So,
No, but we can.
so I think, if, I'd like to know what the RSA is for the year.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
good.
So aside, so before we go off half-cocked about whether or not there's a year.
Sure.
However, our zoning does presuppose that these conditional uses expire.
Yes.
This is, I don't know where this is in, there was Article 1B, no, Article 2, B, which is the rec zone, number 4, permitted uses, item 4, Roman numeral 4, this is on page 6 of 53.
Oh, excuse me.
6 of 53, it's about the middle of page, Roman numeral 4.
Is there a,
It says the applicant may apply for a renewal of a conditional use permit up to 60 days prior to it expiring. And so, that's the only thing I see about them expiring, but I think that the discussion, every discussion I heard was that when a conditional use permit was approved, the idea was that it would be for a period of time. And that it would expire. And I think that if you get a conditional use, it has an expiration date, and it expires, that use is over.
but that conditional use period,
Conditional means exactly what it says,
Okay,
conditional.
hang on, I understand that, Boogie, but what I'm saying is that conditional use period is not set by this board, it is requested by the applicant. He's the one who's requesting the conditional use, he's requesting the time frame.
Well,
Not this board.
But, well, at the end of the day, I mean, if he asks for a 10-year conditional use, the board's gonna say no.
And your
unless it-
justification will be what?
It's too freaking long. We're trying something new,
All
and we
right, so
don't.
what's your legal justification?
It's too freaking.
Because that's what it's gonna boil down to, remember that. You have to have legal standings in order to deny something.
Mr. Chairman, I would like some legal counsel on this.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
Thank you.
I wanted to write down these 2
Let's
points.
stop the discussion, let's move right along.
First of all, the questions I'm gonna ask is, who sets the time period?
Who sets the time period and can it be re-upped? Or whatever, how
Well, I think
Well,
the
it can
question,
be
the question is, we also talk about renewals, so I think
Yeah,
that.
the renewal is-
So I think that.
The lapsing.
But I think that what happens if it doesn't get renewed, is that use gone, and if they come back and apply for the
Right.
same
Well,
thing
Cliff is saying,
again,
you know,
is
if
it
you don't use
new
it,
or is it
it's still
renewed?
good.
So if there's a lapse in time between the
If you
end of
don't use it, it's still
the
good.
assigned permit and the next renew, the person comes back in for the identical same thing, you know, obviously if there was a change to it, obviously that's a change of use.
Right.
So if there's a lapse, is a full site plan review required?
Well, I think the question would be, if there's a lapse and they ask for it again, is that a renewal
Or is it a
a
new use?
application?
That's a better
And
way to read it,
then
yeah.
we can know which things apply.
To answer this question?
And part of that condition is if it's less than a year or greater than a year of lapse.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Okay, so anybody else have questions regarding this they want Laura to answer? No, okay. I think we ought to take a vote as to whether or not to accept the changes that were made.
I'm not done yet.
Tom.
Sorry.
Yes, okay, Cliff, you got more?
One question.
Hold on a second. You found it?
So,
Go ahead.
so
Okay.
regarding what Cliff is looking for.
Let's let Jim go first real quick.
Okay.
We should ask Laura if we can, like the example that Cliff brought up, if somebody's applying for 10 years, if we can justifiably deny it for the 10 years, which we should be able to because we wouldn't know of community impact.
Yeah, that was my,
Community impact studies to verify or
well, my first question for
validate
Laura,
any type of long-term.
the first question for Laura is who sets the time period for the conditional use permit?
Yeah. And is there is, I'm sure Cliff is absolutely right about the 1 year time period automatically assumed if not otherwise specified by the governing board.
When I think about that sort of a thing, for example, say he wanted to take one of those, he or some future person wanted to take one of those approved conditional uses, I can't remember what's on there, badminton or cross-country skiing or whatever the heck they were. His study of what it would take to be profitable doing that activity might look longer, 3 years, 5 years, to build the market, to get people to do the activity.
The profitability of a company is not the concern.
No,
of the town,
it's
period.
not, but
That's just the way that
But
is.
I think that there's going to be give and take at that moment. That when he comes forward, he says, "My background research says it's going to take me 5 years to make a buck on this."
We can consider it as part of his presentation,
Right.
but it cannot be the main reason for a decision from this board. And if it is, there's something seriously wrong with the board.
This is all future boards.
Exactly. Oh, I know.
My term is up next March, so I'll leave that to the future board.
Personal.
Nothing personal.
That's why we didn't get it right the first time, make sure we got all
Right.
our ducks in a row.
Right.
We've been through this, we went through this with Moose Mountain.
It's a
already.
nightmare.
We don't need to go
Yeah.
through the whole horror and stuff again.
Okay, so Rob, you had a question or
Sure,
comment?
so,
You were there.
the one place I know of a 1 year, thingy is starts on page 10 of our zoning, 10 of
Okay.
53. It talks about non-conforming uses. And there is, on page 11, on the top section, number 1, a non-conforming use may be reestablished within a year of a loss, such as, but not limited to, fire, collapse, or natural disaster. An extension not to exceed 6 months may be granted by the ZBA. And so there is a concept of, if you had a non-conforming use that for some reason you stop doing because of a fire or something like that, you can pick it up within a year. That's the only thing I've seen where there's like a...
There's gotta be-
thingy like that.
Well, I know there is, in the RSA's for agriculture, there's a 1 year abandonment RSA, where it says that if you stop using a use on a farm for over a year, and then try to start it up, it is no longer considered, depending on how the zoning reads, it's no longer an accepted, you have to go back in front of the planning board or whoever, depending how your zoning ordinances are written. But it also says that if you you have a 1 year grace period, you can start it back up within that year, and then it's still a conforming use.
I know I've read that same one that he's referring to. I think it's in the right to farm law.
Right.
It talks about if somebody does an activity in an agricultural operation and they're doing it for over 365 days and there are no problems, no complaints, no nothing, people cannot complain. I remember reading that for a totally different reason, but I'm wondering, this one that you just mentioned, the number 1, non-conforming uses, there must be some legal background to that. So I do think it's a worthwhile question.
Item 2 does refer to 674-19, which I have not looked at, but...
Yeah. Of course, I didn't bring along my blue book tonight. One night I need it.
See, the only RSA in our recreational zoning ordinance that we refer to is 674, and that is for a timeline.
Right, because that's
And
where
it says
the,
that we will